Hi everyone, welcome to History on Trial. This is Dr. Tracey McCarthy. This is a discussion in response to a question and also in response to a number of conversations and discussions that are going on about historical figures, and one historical figure in particular, which is Esau. And so there is quite an obsession related to the phenotype of this individual, and the individual, as you'll see, has a very unique phenotype, and that also gives rise to the name Esau. One of the things that came up with the question was this idea of the people of today who would be considered the descendants of Esau. These people today having the exact same phenotype, and dismissing the possibility that people might be descendants based upon not sharing the phenotype that is described for this ancestral figure. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that people don't usually look like their grandparents. They don't look exactly like all of their grandparents. So they tend to be a compilation. And so it wouldn't be prudent to expect that every single person who may be descended from this particular scriptural figure would look exactly like this person. And so what has happened is that people have ruled out all sorts of people and then ruled in all sorts of other people based upon this perception that the people would fit this stereotype today. Now, what we are going to look at is we're going to look at a number of individuals who hold on to that family name, that tribal name, that racial name of Esau as a surname. And we are going to look to see how they have been classified racially. And we are talking about that phenotype racial classification versus simply the family racial classification. And so some people may be very, very surprised to see, again, this dispersion of individuals with that surname Esau. But what we're going to see is we're going to see records of how people have been classified racially in terms of phenotype, and you might be surprised at what you see. Some people may need a little refresher. So as a refresher, the name Esau basically means oldest son of Isaac. And so in a way it means Isaac's son, which also tends to translate to the idea of Saxon. Here you see additional transliteration information related to the name Esau. Many people pronounce the name Esau, and so you might hear Esau or Esau used interchangeably. Let's quickly turn our attention to this issue of the phenotype. So the phenotype of Esau or Esau was a hairy phenotype, and the baby was born basically being red all over, and then also appearing sort of furry or having a lot of hair, like a hairy garment. And so you can see a number of individuals on the screen who would be understood as hairy individuals. And so again, this is based upon that phenotype. And so some individuals, when they think about red and hairy all over, they have all sorts of ideas about what that means and what that looks like and how that translates into different racial classifications. But here you can see a diversity of individuals who are hairy, but perhaps not red all over. The name Esau is also related to Edom and this idea of being red, sort of like the red lentil stew. And so you can see sort of what the color of red looks like when you're talking about red lentil stew. It's also sort of coppery, and you also see it positioned inside of this copper bowl. And so you can see that it's not a bright, true red. It's more of a coppery red. And sometimes people forget that copper is known as one of the red metals. So we're just going to quickly look at copper just to kind of refresh the memory about what this idea of red looks like when you're talking about a human being. Many people talk a lot about being copper colored, and so let's just quickly visit this idea of being copper colored. Now, copper has quite a range in terms of its appearance, and so sometimes copper can present as a more golden looking color, and then sometimes it presents a little orangey looking, and then sometimes it looks terracotta. And so you do see quite a variety, but it's important to remember that as far as metals go, copper is understood as a reddish metal, and you can see that on the screen. So you can see the clay presentation, that coppery looking color in terms of skin color. And so some of this, presumably somewhere on the screen with these examples, would be an example of what Esau would be looking like in terms of his skin color. Before we go any further, it's important to keep in mind that if you take any of those men that were on the screen and you match them with any of the women on the screen, you can see how you would have diversity in terms of the offspring. And so you are going to have that diversity regardless of whether you're talking about Esau or anyone else. And so down through time, it's pretty much inconceivable that every single child that would be descended from someone named Esau would look exactly like Esau, regardless of whether they are male or female, and regardless of who the partners were for the people marrying out of that tribe or that racial family over time. And so, keeping with the thoughts of many, we are going to look at Esau presented out of Europe. And so we're going to look at individuals with the name Esau, and we're going to look at where they might be located or where they have been located in Europe. Here you see this individual with naturalization papers from 1896. This individual was Franz Esau, or Franz Esau, and the country of birth was Germany. Here we have another individual with this family tribal racial name of Esau. We have John Lewis Esau. This is from a person born in 1848, and this individual was coming out of England. Okay, this is a record for an individual named Sarah Esau, and you can see that there's a transliteration here, so you see the Esau or the Esau as Esav with the V. And you also see, this is from 1923, you also see the individual has a nationality and a race, and they are not the same. So the individual has a nationality of Russia, then the individual has a language of German, and then the individual racially is classified as being Dutch. The person is described as having a medium complexion with gray hair and blue eyes. While there is a tendency to associate Esau or Esau with Europe, particularly the dynamic of being understood as Saxon, there is also an indication that Esau, or this name Esau or Esav, is dispersed around the world. And so you even see a manifestation of Esau in what is known as Indian country in the Americas. And here you see an individual named Joseph Esau, and you can see that this is from 1888, and this individual indicates that they were born in Indian territory. Now we're going to look at some phenotype dynamics related to Esau, people carrying this name. We are going to see not only phenotype information, we are also going to see information related to this racial classification. And by racial classification, what is meant is status classification. And for our first historical record, we are looking at a Florida death index for an individual named Juanita Esau. And you can see here that this person has been classified racially as Black. And here you see a listing for an entire family of Esau. And you can see that when you look off to the right-hand side, you see that all of the individuals in the Esau family are identified as Negro. Now, this is important because many people believe that Esau is categorized as something other than Negro. So you can see that there is this categorization, and you can also see that Esau is located according to this record. And this is the 1930 U.S. federal census, the individual and the entire family located in South Carolina. Continuing to look at the 1930 U.S. federal census, this time for Mississippi. You see an individual, Annie Esau, and this individual, when you look over to the right-hand side, this person is identified racially as Negro. And here we have, coming out of the Commonwealth of Virginia, death certificate for a Jesse Esau. And you can see here that this individual also, when you look over to the right, is classified racially as Negro. And here is an additional record coming out of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and this is for a Lila Esau. This individual is categorized racially as Black. Here you have another individual. This individual has a father on the certificate of death, and you see down on the left-hand side, down below, you see the father is named Calvin Esau, and the color or race is identified as Negro. And this is from 1967. And here you have another individual from the Esau family, tribe, race. This individual is baby Esau, and this individual is classified racially as colored. And this is from 1945. You can see here with this registration card that this individual has the name Esau, but spelled E-S-A-W, and this is Shadrach Esau. This individual was born in 1891, and this individual is classified as Negro. Now let's check out these military registrations. Now you can see here you have an individual, Ralph Esau. And this individual is described as having black eyes, black hair, dark brown skin, and then classified as Negro. Here we have an additional person. This person is Clinton Esau, and this individual is described as also having dark brown skin, black hair, brown eyes, and is classified as Negro. Hopefully this is helpful so that you can see that there's quite a bit of diversity when it comes to people carrying this name Esau, this family tribal name. Now, some individuals will still insist that Esau should look a particular way. But when you figure out that you can actually change a family's phenotype in one generation, 2 generations, and so you can actually wash out any manifestation, any overt manifestation of an ancestor. And so you might have individuals who look like they have one racial classification, and they may be descended from ancestors that have another racial classification based upon having different phenotypes and being classified into different statuses. And so we're going to start to wrap this up by looking at the surname Edom, which is a parallel to Esau. And here we have the Edom family, and we have William Edom as the head of this family. And as you can see, there are a number of family members, and off to the right, you can see that the racial classification for Edom is Black. And as we wind this up, you can see an additional family, again, out of Alabama, 1920 U.S. federal census. And this is for Daniel Edom. And Daniel has, again, a list of family members. And you can see that they are all classified racially as Black. Now, it's important to remember that these are not the only classifications. This is just a sampling of individuals so that you can see that there is some diversity. You have individuals coming out of Europe with the name Esau, and then you have individuals who are right here in America with the surname Esau or Edom, and those individuals have been classified as Black or Negro. There are some that are also classified as white, and so you should be able to see quite a bit of diversity. But that's the important point here, is that there is a bit of diversity going on in terms of this surname and individuals who would be presumably descended from someone named Esau, or descended from this person or this figure of Edom. Many people are trying to understand who Esau is, or maybe, or may have been, in a dynamic that's known as othering, trying to distinguish between self and not self. It's very difficult to do this, however, based solely upon this idea of phenotypes. And as you can see, individuals with this surname, this tribal name, this family name, they may be coming from a number of places. And we looked at a number of other groups that carry this name as a transliteration, and we've also seen some of the phenotypes of those individuals. Now, interestingly, a number of individuals who do carry this name, they do have a reddish tinge to the skin for some individuals, not all individuals, but that is noteworthy, actually. And so hopefully this information is helpful so that people can start to broaden their perspectives about who may or may not be Esau, and not be too wed to the idea that every single person down through time must look just like an ancestor from thousands of years ago. What's also interesting is you have a number of individuals who are pointing fingers about who is and who is not Esau, and those individuals pointing the fingers may actually be Esau themselves. Remember, knowledge is power. Take care. See you soon.